I'd like to thank my colleague, Deputy Jim O'Callaghan, for placing the motion before the House for us to discuss here tonight. And I think, Minister, that we'll all agree that we shouldn't be here at all discussing this, in the sense that this matter should have been dealt with properly and conclusively in the first instance, and it's regrettable that we find ourselves in this situation. And my colleague, Deputy O'Callaghan, has alluded to the concept of justice, and we all know of the famous maximum saying that justice delayed is justice denied. Now, unfortunately, the O'Farrell family will probably never achieve justice to their satisfaction in its entirety, but I think there is, we would all agree, a huge onus and obligation on us to assist them in getting to the truth of the matter in terms of how it arrived at a situation where a man with so many convictions and with such a history and a litany behind him was in a position to carry out the act that he did, which deprived Shane O'Farrell of his life. I want to pay tribute to the O'Farrell family. I met them on a number of occasions when I was in the role of Fianna Fáil Justice spokesperson, and I think it's really remarkable the campaign that they have put in and the fact that they have stayed with this issue for their loved one, Shane O'Farrell, with such dedication and with such tenacity. I heard Lucy O'Farrell on the radio last week, and again laying out all the facts along the way in relation to it. And I think, Minister, when you consider the timeline over which we're now discussing these events, there has been so much reform. There has been Garda reform, there has been GSOC reform, there has been a new policing authority introduced, there has been various reports by the Garda Inspectorate, there has been the Commission on the Future of Policing, a new Garda Commissioner. There has been many new dawns and many new reports. But I think this case of Shane O'Farrell is a blight on Garda Síochána. And it doesn't give me any pleasure to say that. I don't think it gives any of us any pleasure to say that. And I think we need to get to the truth of the matter here. Reference was made, as you know, to the independent review mechanism, which would have looked at a submission made by the O'Farrells along the way in relation to this. And we will all recall that there were many cases sent to the independent review mechanism. And that was, I suppose, an effort by everybody in here and by the Minister of the day to try and deal with some cases where people felt that were badly handled or where people were denied proper process or indeed denied justice. But that mechanism was far, far from satisfactory, because people could only make written submissions and they didn't get a chance to meet with people face to face. And I think the fact that this has gone through that and has gone through GSOC, and we're now here discussing a public inquiry and indeed the terms of reference of a public inquiry, we have to have the proper terms of reference. And I think it's worth summing up the way that this case has evolved. The state failed the O'Farrell family in the manner in which the death of Shane was investigated. The state failed the O'Farrell family in the manner in which the death of Shane was prosecuted. The state failed the O'Farrell family in the manner in which the complaints around the investigation and the prosecution were handled by GSOC. And the state failed in continuing to fail them through the attempt to limit the terms of reference, which we're now discussing here today. And I think, Minister, really it's incumbent on us all to just give it the opportunity and to go with the terms of reference that Judge Houghton has provided in April of 2019 and allow the inquiry to work to get to the truth, because if we narrow the terms of reference, that will narrow the scope within which the work can take place, and it will also narrow the findings and the recommendations that can be made. So it doesn't serve us all well at all to any end. So I would ask you to please accept the motion placed by my colleague Deputy Jim O'Callaghan.
Deputy Collins and Tara Taleagus Couch, Charlie Flanagan.
In the first instance, I move an amendment to delete the words as per the As per the written record, I don't intend to read the amendment in its entirety. But can I say, in response to Deputy O'Callaghan and Deputy Collins, I agree with much of what has been said. Indeed, at the heart of the matter that we're discussing this evening is the dreadful loss of a loved one by the O'Farrell family. Indeed, as we've done on previous occasions, I again express my sincere condolence, those of my government, to the O'Farrell family on the tragic loss of Shane O'Farrell. Indeed, while the government has put forward a counter motion, which is on the record, I want to stress, indeed I want to acknowledge that we're all working towards achieving the same goal, and that is finding an appropriate response to the acute pain of the O'Farrell family arising from the dreadful loss and their search for answers. In this context, I'm glad of the opportunity to clarify a number of important issues in relation to the matter, and indeed I look forward to a fact-based debate on how we can fully address this matter in a way that is not only legally robust, but of course legally compliant. The circumstances surrounding the tragic death of Shane O'Farrell have been addressed on several occasions in this and indeed in the upper house. Indeed, here in this house last week on the 7th of November. As I said then, the terms of reference of the scoping exercise being conducted by Judge Houghton were finalised in September. I want to assure the House that there is no intention on my part, there is no intention on the part of the Government to in any way limit or constrict the scoping exercise in any way. Indeed, I share the concern of Deputy O'Callaghan that this House can and must assist the O'Farrell family in pursuit of answers to legitimate questions as posed. In this regard, the terms of reference for the scoping exercise are focused as required by law, which was clearly set out, as Deputy O'Callaghan has acknowledged, in the Supreme Court case of Shatter and Gearan, to reduce the risk of legal challenge to the recommendations of the scoping exercise. Indeed, that judgment requires the terms of reference of a scoping exercise to be as specific as possible, to remove potential ambiguity and focused enough to promote a timely outcome, to ensure fairness to all of the parties involved. However, they still allow for a review of the issues intended, including the issues raised in the motion as put forward this evening. Secondly, I requested Judge Houghton to make an initial report to me within 8 weeks of the commencement of his work. I'm expecting to receive that interim report this Friday, the 15th of November, although I understand that Judge Houghton is willing to delay this to accommodate further engagement with the O'Farrell family. And can I say that that report, as soon as it arrives on my desk, will be shared with the O'Farrell family. As set out Coherlock or Lascian Corla in the government's counter motion, Judge Houghton will, among other elements, in that interim report, set out the expected time frame for completion of the scoping exercise that he has been charged with. He will advise me whether there are any circumstances surrounding the death of Mr O'Farrell which warrant further investigation or inquiry beyond those already carried out. He will advise me whether any inquiry is necessary into the systems and procedures for the sharing of information between the Garda Síochána, the court service and other relevant state bodies operating at the time of the death of Mr Shane O'Farrell. He will advise me as to the form of such investigation or inquiry. He will advise me as to its terms of reference, and he will advise me as to the suggested composition of the investigation or inquiry, and he will do that at the earliest opportunity. In terms of his final report, I want to be very clear that Judge Houghton is free to make any recommendation he sees fit, including the establishment of any form of statutory inquiry or any form of non-statutory inquiry. It's also the case that the O'Farrell family is free to make any representations they wish to Judge Houghton in relation to any matter they wish to see inquired into in any future investigation or inquiry. Should Judge Houghton recommend an inquiry of whatever type, he's been asked to provide draft terms of reference to such an inquiry as has been mentioned by Deputy O'Callaghan, and with which I fully agree. As Ceann Comhairle, I'm anxious to see real progress on this matter. However, I would ask deputies to appreciate that I cannot and should not prejudge Judge Houghton's report or change his terms of reference just as he is about to issue his initial report to me, especially in any way that doesn't comply fully with the law of the land. I'd like to take this opportunity to respond directly to the concerns that I've heard in relation to the terms of reference of Judge Houghton's scoping exercise. Deputy O'Callaghan will appreciate, and indeed other deputies, in setting up the scoping exercise itself and in determining its terms of reference, I am bound to be guided by the legal advice of the Attorney-General. The terms of reference of the scoping exercise must be compliant with the line of jurisprudence established by the Supreme Court's decision in Shatter and Gearan. Indeed, Las Ceann Comhairle, as Minister for Justice and Equality, I must act within the law. And I would expand that and say, so must all of us collectively in this House. The terms of reference provided to Judge Houghton respect the law. But I will repeat this point, that there is absolutely no impediment on Judge Houghton to make any recommendation he sees fit, including the establishment of any form of future inquiry, if he considers that necessary and appropriate. And again I repeat that the O'Farrell family are free to make any representations to Judge Houghton in relation to any matter that they would wish to see inquired into any future inquiry. Judge Houghton is an experienced judge. Judge Houghton is a respected judge. He's also very dedicated to the work he's been asked to undertake, for which I am most grateful to him. I know that Judge Houghton has been engaging with the O'Farrell family, and I would like to see that engagement continue in this sensitive and tragic case. I ask Ceann Comhairle, could be the 5th or 6th time that this House has had an opportunity of dealing with these issues. But I ask, as I asked on the first occasion upon which we had an opportunity to debate this issue, I ask deputies to reflect on the situation. I ask deputies to acknowledge the points that I've laid out and to join me in seeking to make progress on this matter, but at the same time and at all times as we should, respecting the operation of the law and process. In the meantime, I look forward to receipt of Judge Houghton's initial report in the coming days, which will undoubtedly ensure progress in what is a dreadful, tragic case, and upon which we all seek solutions.
Deputy Sinn Féin.